Hey, it's Newtsy. Today, I'm excited to bring you this information because if you're just tired of waiting on the world to change, like the song says, or waiting on your life to change, and you just want to generate or create a force in your life so you can have a life that you love. But as long as we feel like it's out there and we're looking for it, it keeps us separated from it. So in our video today, The Spine, the Spirit, and a Creative Force, it's another one in the series, The Spine and the Spirit. So those of you who've been watching them, welcome back. And those of you who haven't, I would really recommend that you at least watch the last one. So where I talk about triggers, so you can kind of get caught up to speed. But we're going to learn today, in this moment, some practical tools that we can use in our life to generate, to create a force in our life so we can have the life that we love. So if we're not going to wait on the world to change, that means we have to change, and everyone knows that change can be uncomfortable. But I think it helps if we look at it from the perspective of the central nervous system and how that works. And we've been talking about how we have neurons that fire and wire together, and they create these pathways or these routes through the central nervous system, and they become entrained or entrenched in our central nervous system. And when we start to try to change, that whole neural pathway will nudge us to stay in our lane. But then we end up feeling stuck and stagnant and bored, and we have the same behaviors and the same patterns and the same experiences. So if we're not actively engaged in what I call wrangling our old patterns to the ground, or actively engaged in dealing with our central nervous system, we're going to get the same. Our whole mode of being is going to nudge us to stay in our lane and continue in our current behavior. And then we end up looking for things outside of ourselves. And so we have to really engage in change. But when you start doing this, you will get triggered. I don't know if you've already noticed that. When I was doing the video on triggers, I was just having an opportunity at every turn to deal with my triggers. It was amazing. But how it works then is when you try to move off center, or you try to prune, synaptic pruning, those synaptic neural pathways in your central nervous system in your brain, the body will begin to throw everything at you. It will be like, let's say you decide, okay, well, I want to be healthier, so I'm going to start taking walks in the evening. It'll be like, no, it's too dark and it's not safe out there. It'll be like, no, it's raining. It'll mess up your hair. Or, if you want to start dealing with some of the emotions that you have practiced in your past, it'll scare you. It's like, when you go into a porta potty, you don't want to look down the hole and look at all the poo that's in there. It's kind of like that. The body will be like, no, don't look at those emotions. Distract, look at Facebook, watch trash TV. It'll start to begin to throw things at you because it wants you to stay in that safety mechanism. And so when I started to deal with, all of the trauma that I obviously had suppressed, I had to begin to look at the emotions that I was practicing, and it was really scary because when we have an experience and then we have thoughts associated with those experiences, and then they turn into an emotion and we store that in our physiology, when we try to move away from that, we break the synaptic chains, or we do synaptic pruning, that energy gets released, and then, that emotion might come up, bubbling up to the surface. And we're, if you don't understand what's happening when we do get triggered, then, it becomes really, really scary. So to give you an example, I drive a really long way on Tuesdays. And so, I wanted to go after it. I didn't want to continue to live a life where I battled depression and anxiety and fear. And so on my long sojourn on Tuesdays, I would just begin to, kind of peep down the poo hole and see what it was that I would feel when I had all this trauma and what behaviors and moods I had been practicing. And so when I would take a look at them, I would realize that I would have that emotion and energy stored in my physiology, and it might come bubbling up. And so instead of diverting my attention and avoiding it, I would go ahead and experience it. And the body doesn't want you to do that because it would rather have you go into fight, flight, or freeze mode so you can get the adrenaline push or the adrenaline payoff rather than, try to get rid of that entrenched or hardened pattern in your central nervous system. And so sometimes it might come up as I was driving, I would have to maybe scream at the top of my lungs for a few minutes, or I would have a little boohoo when I would think about, that little girl that experienced all that trauma. But as long as I would run from feeling those emotions, they're going to stay trapped or would stay trapped in my physiology. Because we said that our personality is a set of traits, moods, behaviors, and emotions that shape our personal genetics. So our moods, behaviors, and emotions shape our personal genetics, which is epigenetics, which Bruce Lipton does so beautifully in his explanation of it. And then it controls our experiences. So everything that we think that we are is learned behaviors from our childhood until now. And if it's true that our brain is this elaborate receiver and filter, it's done so, or it gets these programs by being imprinted and engraved upon. And so we have an experience, and the greater that experience or event and the greater the emotion associated with it, the more it ends up having a hold on us. And so, what happens, the effect of that is we end up wanting to stay in safety and the known. We don't want that to happen to us again. And so we run from anything that looks like, smells like, tastes like, sounds like, or even remotely resembles those high amplitude events and emotions that we've experienced in our past and in our childhood and all the way up until now. And so we end up running away from the unknown because that's not safe. So that means we end up living our entire life in the known. And so we can't be creative and we can't have a creative force in our life if we are that overactive smoke detector. So that's why they say happiness is an inside job. And that's why it talks about, I think it's in Acts where it says, why do you stand up looking to the heavens? Because the kingdom of heaven is on the inside. It's an inside job. Building an awareness of the emotions that we've been practicing that don't serve us, such as fear and anxiety and loneliness and unhappiness and stress, is really important, as well as defining the emotions that we want to practice. But all that being said, we really have to go for it. We really have to keep the heat on our central nervous system because we've been practicing these old patterns our entire life. And so as long as we're practicing the same emotions and we're having the same behavior and we continue in the same personality, we're going to have the same life or the personal reality. And I have such a great example of that. It was really tough to go through. It was during this last bout of sickness that I had. If you looked at my life, I literally was the most happy that I had ever been up to that point. I'm married to the man of my dreams. We have so much fun together and we give each other room to do what we need to do. And I really feel like I am the most me, the most authentically me that I have ever been being married to Jay. And, I ate extremely healthy. I know how to eat. I have advanced studies in nutrition. And so I was eating healthy and I I've exercised almost my entire life. I know how to exercise. I'm pretty fit for an over 50-year-old woman. And so when I had the metabolic breakdown and I was going into anaphylaxis and I had the skin cancer on my nose and I was just really a mess, it was so discouraging to me because my outside life and my behaviors, I thought, were awesome. And so I couldn't understand why I had this, physiology that was breaking down. But now knowing what I know, I realized that I had these hardened patterns of breath that were keeping me, in fight, flight, or freeze and anxiety. And I didn't have any energy going to rest and repair and restore and create. And not only that, these emotions that I practiced, mainly I would forecast the worst case scenario. I would feel like, oh, my dogs are going to die, or oh, my husband's going to die, or oh, something bad's going to happen. That was a program that was running so strongly in my life because I felt like that was keeping me safe. But really what it was doing was it was making me sick. And so what's been so great, I'm so thankful for the work that I am involved in and the things that I have learned through the Dr. Joe Dispenza community and the tools that I have, subsequently and after that found that have been so helpful to me. And I've been talking a lot about them, but this one is gratitude. And it's not the kind of gratitude where, you just pretend like you're thankful for everything in your life, or you scribble down a few things, or you say some emotional, affirmations or emotionless affirmations, that don't have an impact on you. That's not the kind of gratitude I'm talking about. Let's define it from maybe a little bit of a scientific perspective. So gratitude, it means a quality of being thankful and a readiness to show appreciation for kindness and to return that kindness. It is a state of receivership of things to be thankful for. And that word receivership means a person who holds and receives funds, or it could be energy, a person who administers funds or energy. It can also mean a device for converting signals, which sounds an awful lot like the brain, doesn't it? So what does this kind of gratitude look like? Well, I can tell you it doesn't mean lying to yourself. And it doesn't mean doing things that, are not going to have enough of an emotional impact to imprint and engrave on your brain and your central nervous system. That kind of gratitude causes no changes in your brain chemistry. So before we get into the kind of gratitude that does, I want to talk to you about how to make it more effective. And this is really interesting. So if you practice gratitude and you do it by arousing your autonomic nervous system for 2 to 3 minutes, it literally will change your brain chemistry. And the easiest way to change or arouse your autonomic nervous system is breath work. So you can do 2 to 3 minutes of breath work and then do your gratitude practice, and it will change your brain chemistry as if you're taking a pharmacology type drug, or you're doing HIIT training, or you're doing other things that that will change your brain chemistry. So doing breath work for 2 to 3 minutes, doing your gratitude practice will have a long-lasting effect on your brain chemistry. And so the other thing that makes it more effective is that what they've come to realize through research is that, we are wired for story. And so if you can embed your gratitude practice in a story, it's really very, very helpful. And they found the best way to receive benefits from a gratitude practice is when you are the receiver of gratitude. But, we don't want to be beholden or waiting on people to be grateful for what, we have done in their life. So we can do things like recall a time in our life where someone has been really grateful, genuinely grateful, and it had an impact on us, and we can recall that. We do that all the time. Like when something bad happens, we recall that bad thing that happened, and we make up this whole narrative. Well, if she does that next time, I'm gonna say this. And we think about that and we practice that. Well, we can do the same thing. We can recall a time where somebody's been genuinely grateful, or maybe written us a letter, or a story that we have heard, and recall that. I think that's why the testimonies on the Dr. Joe Dispenza YouTube channel are so impactful, especially the ones that really resonate with us, because we can see how somebody's life has been impacted and how they have been grateful for the changes, and then that actually will change our chemistry in our brain. And what they found, that it only takes like 3 times a week for 2 to 3 minutes for it really to have an effect on our brain chemistry. And so let's get into how we have a gratitude practice. I'm going to share with you exactly what I do to generate and create a creative force in my life by using gratitude. And these are things I've done such a deep dive on the scientific part of a gratitude practice, and also the emotional part of a gratitude practice, and what all these different traditions say about being grateful. And I found these things to be truly helpful and truly effective. So we definitely want to be aware, or build our awareness of the emotions that we don't want to continue practicing. And so what I have done, or what I have been doing, is I have this notebook, and I created a sheet that I'll be glad to send you. If you just email me, I'll send it to you for free. But in this worksheet, I've put these frames askew because it jolts my central nervous system, because I want to straighten them. But I have 2 frames, and then I have lines out to the side, as you can see. And then what I did is I found an illustration of the emotions that I don't want to practice. And I'd be glad to send you a copy of, ones that have been helpful for me in my life, because I think, for me, it's really been anxiety and fear. So I found pictures that kind of denote what it feels like when I'm functioning in anxiety and when I'm functioning in fear. Because we've been talking about, the brain is this elaborate filter and receiver. And when we dial into something that is important to us, and we let our brain and our central nervous system know that it is important, then it will tune into that. And then we can begin to raise our awareness. And then when we feel these emotions that come up, then we can choose a different emotion. And that's where this second worksheet comes in. And so what I have done is I've identified some emotions that I really want to practice. And, the biggie for me is freedom. I want to have freedom, and I want to have openness. So I'll send you an example of what that looks like for me, and then the things that I have written out to the side. So we've talked about how, in order to imprint and engrave on our brain and our central nervous system, it has to be something that is emotional, or has enough energy to engrave and imprint on our brain. And so that's why if we do it and we create a story around it, instead of creating the story of like, if that happens again, I'm gonna say this, and if she does that again, I'm gonna do that. Instead, create a story around the emotions of what it feels like, and go into detail of what freedom feels like. Not knowing how it's going to happen, but experiencing the feeling of what we want to have in our life. There's a big difference, like not getting in the weeds of dictating of how it happens. That is the known, but just experiencing or generating or creating a feeling of gratitude for having those emotions in our life. And then, spending some time in contemplation. So what I do is just a couple times a day when my alarm goes off, I'll do a little bit of breath work, and then I'll take my sheets out or I'll take my notebook out and I'll look and practice for just a few minutes those emotions that I want in my future. It really is powerful. It really does change your brain chemistry, and then you begin to fire and wire those new emotions, and then you bring those events to you instead of trying to get them to come to you from the outside. We generate them. We create the force of gratitude in our life. So I'm really hoping this resonates with you. Next week, I'm going to do the breath work video that I'm hoping will be helpful. And then if you would like these worksheets, I'll have my email listed below and I'll send those to you. But until next time, I'm really excited for you to begin or even evolve your gratitude practice. And then, I just am believing that you're going to be blessed, and I look forward till the next time we get together. So see you next time.